I'm Anthony. I lead partnerships at Trello. Just quick raise of hands. Who here has used Trello? Okay, it's a lot of people. And who here knows that Trello has a platform? All right, well, I have my work cut out for me still. Yeah, so I want to start today really quickly just with the number, 34. It's a small number. It's not like a big, impressive number. But 34, according to Better Cloud, is the average number of SaaS apps that a SaaS company uses. And when you think about that, that's the average. This is 2017 numbers. I guarantee when Better Cloud comes out with their report this year, that's going to be a whole lot higher. And that's because, as we all know, all of our companies are using more SaaS apps, and as we're building our own SaaS apps. So because of all these SaaS apps, we need platforms. And you're thinking to yourself, Anthony, we're all here because we know this already. And that's true. When we have all of these SaaS apps and we decide, okay, we need a platform, the next step is typically, cool, like let's make an API. And let's make that API publicly available. Let's document that API. That's great. This is Trello's, some of our API docs. That's a good starting point. Now people can build on top of Trello. And then we're going to throw an email up, and this is like my inbox with all sorts of obfuscated emails. And we're going to start emailing people and telling them about our API. And that was great too. Like we actually get people out there, build some awareness around that API, and people start building. But I think that over the last 5 years or so, we've seen all of these companies, and Trello is one of them, recognize that APIs are something that we all need to have. It is table stakes for actually creating a SaaS app today, and a lot of our companies' own products are built on the same APIs that we publish. And so what I'm proposing is that we need to evolve the way that we work with our partners and with developers, moving away from this just like creating the docs and publicizing it and then hoping that people build. So I think that we can do this better. And when I say do this better, I really mean changing the way that we approach partnerships and making it a whole lot easier for people to build on top of our platforms. And so I'm going to share a few of the ways that I've seen companies like Trello and Atlassian and some other companies do this that I find is like an evolution of partnerships. But I didn't come up with these. These are just my own observations. And as you're thinking through these, rather than a Q&A at the end, I would really like to make this a little bit more collaborative. I want to hear from you on some of the things that I may be missing in this presentation. So one of the first things that I've seen Atlassian do after Trello was acquired last year, they have this thing called App Week. App Week is this week-long event that's not quite a hackathon, not quite a developer conference. It's kind of like a week of lab work where we invite partners from all over the world to come to spend 1 week with our PMs and platform engineers across all of our products to build new integrations. So this is like our products like Jira, Confluence, Stride, Bitbucket, Trello, to get people in the same room and actually build new things. And one of the things that Matt from T-Sheets mentioned earlier that I thought was really interesting and is along this thought is that having our platform engineers and our platform PMs in the same room as the partners that are developing these integrations for that week, it builds incredible empathy for those people that are building on the platform. And it's like, I think Matt said something around like the follow on or work go, yeah, there you go. That you actually they experience the painful process of setting up auth or the bug that they just ran into. And it's really easy for those platform teams, especially the platform engineering teams, to not see that developer pain every day And I'll tell you, every time after one of these app weeks, we go back and fix some things, we create a new documentation, we do something else that really makes that experience better. And for the developers, beyond just getting those things fixed, they feel heard. They feel like when they see that new API endpoint, like, I was the one that told Trello that they needed to build that. And so there's like, just like any other product work, when you think that you've built something that people actually want, and then you build that thing, it's not always necessarily the right thing that person actually needs. And so you get that conversation going. The second thing is you have a lot of fun. Our app weeks are a time where you hang out with people that are building on top of your platform, and you recognize that it's kind of this like reciprocal, like, hey, we're all people. We all have like things going on outside of work. We're not just this person behind an email. And the third thing that kind of like relies on those first two things is you get better integrations as a result. I can't tell you how many partners I've worked with where at the beginning of the conversation they were going to do X integration, and then they came to App Week and they built Z. And it just like brought that user experience like leaps and bounds forward, because they got the help that they needed on the technical side faster. They got unblocked. And then they also you got to spend time with some of the PMs that really understand our users and understand what an interesting experience would be. And so you get that kind of creative and collaborative experience. Now, Atlassian's a big company, and we have made the budget to do this. But you might be at a smaller company that doesn't. I would really love to see someone in this room, and maybe somebody's done it already, do something like this App Week and do it virtually. Because I think that it can be done. You could have video, video check-ins, streaming video on multiple locations, various like office hours, and you can have a chat system set up. You can have like a Confluence page or something like that where people is like all the knowledge sharing and places to hang out. You don't get to have beers together at the end of the day. Well, maybe you can do that over video, but I really think that can be done. And I think that one of the things about doing it in person is that you actually can physically remove people from there every day. There's nobody tapping them on their shoulder and distracting them from building that thing. And that's a little harder to recreate in the virtual sense, but I think that's really possible. The second thing is around communication with your partners. I was at one of the lunch tables and heard somebody talk about how they use Slack for their partner communications. They created Slack channels. When Trello first started working with Slack a couple of years ago, when we started our platform, they invited us into their platform Slack. We started having conversations with their engineers, their developers, their partner people, some people on their marketing side, and we had all the Trello people, all the Slack people in one shared channel. And so when we built our platform, we did the same thing. We created a Slack team and started inviting certain partners to that we wanted to go deeper with, and we want to build that relationship with them. And this, like similar to those app weeks, it helps break down these like barriers of like the two monolithic companies kind of like talking to one another, and brings you like really closer together. And it does that in just little ways that we all know chat can do that email can't, like emoji reactions to something somebody said, and like little jokes and lighthearted conversations. It also just accelerates that development, right? So when you actually have people that are have a problem with an API endpoint or experiencing a bug, the people are right there in that room that are able to help, and it's not some long threaded email. Trello, a lot of people inside Trello don't actually use email because if they don't have to work too much with people externally. So it's been really valuable in helping accelerate development with our partners. And the same thing, similar to App Week, that empathy. When you're in a Slack team and you see people chatting there from various partners throughout the day, it reminds you that, hey, there are these people here that do care about our platform and are building on top of it. This one I think is kind of on the tool side of thing, is something that is really overlooked today, and I think it will have a big impact on a lot of organizations. I've seen a couple companies do this, but Trello I've been really impressed by, has done this more than most, is actually moving away from just putting documentation in, or code snippets and all of that into their documentation. We do this, right? And you can see here's the API, here's Ruby, Node, JavaScript, Python. You get all these little code snippets, these examples. Like this was great 3 years ago. The future, I think, is Glitch. And if you don't know Glitch, it's a product built by the folks at Fog Creek Software. Disclaimer, that was the company that Trello spun out of a few years ago. Glitch is a way to collaboratively build apps with other people, but it's also like hosted apps. So rather than actually just giving them like a little code sample of something that, how a certain piece of the API works, we can actually give them a live functioning app that they can use and just riff off of. They call it remixing it. So here's one of the Trello power-ups. This is the card snooze power-up. If you go into Trello today and you go to power-ups, you can use the card snooze power-up. I think that this is still actually running fully on Glitch. And when I say running, like this, all of these Glitch projects are actually hosted. It just creates like a little AWS hosting. Every time you remix these, it's actually creating things in AWS that is like you can actually run stuff on. So rather than that's a friction for people to get started. They have to like create the environment and start writing some code to get everything set up. In this, all they have to do is click remix your own, and they have a live functioning app that's a copy of this, and then they can just start going and editing that code, and they can attach that to. They can actually point the Trello power-up project that they're working on to this, and it'll actually start working. And they can. So there's two things. Not only does it just speed up that development time, but it also speeds up that first success with your platform. They can immediately start seeing something that they built-ish working on Trello. And I think that more and more companies should be using this and can be using this because it's really. We just hear from developers how fun it is to start using the Trello platform because they can just, it got them 80% of the way there, and they just have to do the extra 20%. Now this one is kind of, I think that a lot of our companies probably have somebody on our partnership team or on our platform team that does developer advocacy or developer experience. Can I just get a quick raise of hands? Who has like developer experience, developer advocate, developer evangelist? Okay, yeah, a few people that have that. I have a counterpart on my team. His name's Bentley. Bentley's our developer advocate at Trello. He is amazing, and I really would encourage everybody to go find yourself a Bentley. Not my Bentley though, because he's taken. And I say that because what Bentley brings to the process with working with developers, or we're working with our developers, is like bringing their voice back to the platform team, which I don't have the skills to actually do. He understands the frictions that they're running into. He creates those glitch projects. He's the one at App Week that's partly representing Trello. To show them, to be there to answer any of those questions. He's the one that's often jumping into Slack. Like, the developer advocate role has evolved to be even more like forward-facing than it ever was before. And I know that like there's the conferences and hackathons that a lot of people think of when they think of developer evangelists, and for some companies that's a different type of role. But for the partnership side of things, they've got to really be able to talk to those developers and understand how to make developing on the platform delightful for your partners, and then just for that like developer community as a whole. And then for the more business-oriented people in the room, I would highly encourage you to work on becoming more technical. I'll tell you a little story. 6 years ago, I didn't know what an API was at all. 4 years ago, I ran a company where the API was one of the core products, and that was a hell of a learning curve. I still work on this all the time, and I read through our own API. By the way, I don't know how to code. I've never been a developer in any kind of way. And I read through our API documentation, and I understand the updates that they're making to it. I sit with the team, and as they're actually developing the APIs, to understand what it does. I have read a ton of articles online to be able to talk about APIs in a more credible way. And so I'm not perfect. One day I'll take on that learning to code thing. But I will tell you that I have gotten to the point that I can be convincing enough with developers for at least a couple conversations. So these days where we just say, great, let's, this seems to make sense. Let me bring my developer advocate into the room, and he can talk to you about, walk you through our documentation. No, we can't keep doing that. And what I'm able to do is allow to free up Bentley's time to focus on the creating cool samples and spending time at App Week by not wasting his time on those first 1 or 2 calls with a partner where we don't know where this conversation is going to even go. They might have some questions about the API. If I bring Bentley in there, we all know that sometimes those don't go anywhere, and I'm just wasting his time. So the longer I can delay that by being able to speak credibly about our API, the happier he is, the happier our partners are, because we don't slow the momentum on either. Cool. So, like I said, I think that that today, where we have been over the last few years of creating API docs, making them public, was an important step. Where I think that we need to go is to really rethink how it is that we work with our partners to create experiences for them that are easier, that are a lot more fun and more open and transparent than they are today. So with that, I would love to hear some of the things that you've seen other companies do as you've engaged with them in partnership efforts, things that I may have missed in there, or if you have other experiences that you agree with these, I'd love to hear those too, or questions. Thank you.
Thank you. One of your points in there was get smarter, so learn more about the API or more get technical, which I absolutely agree with. Wondering if you can share some tools you used, or how did you do that for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. I thought about kind of going back and looking at some of the articles that I read, but I think that first was even just getting into the whole world of REST and RESTful APIs, and is that understanding the types of requests that people, or that as a developer you're using to either get and post and all of that, right? Just understanding some of the nouns around APIs, I think is a big step forward. So there's just plenty of internet articles about that, so I'd start there. And I really have just sat down and made time with our platform engineers to have them talk me through the various aspects of the API. And so they just roll on the floor laughing when I tell a developer, oh well, you should you're going to want to look at the t.size2 resource, and here's the link for it in the API docs. They've never worked with somebody on the partnership side that can actually point people to the right, understand the problem that the developer is having and point them to the right part in the documentation. And at the end of the day, it's really just a lot of reading, and you don't have to understand necessarily the code behind it. But understanding the types of problems that it helps solve, and just remembering where it is. If that's helpful.
As you're thinking about how you and your team allocate your time, with the platform, how do you think about spending your time, evangelizing, recruiting new partners versus helping them build to your platform versus actually making sure they're really successful over the long term? We struggle with this, so that's why I'm asking. How do you think about that allocation of your time and your team's time?
Yeah, it's a great question. like just be vulnerable here. Like I don't have a good answer to that. We definitely struggle with it as well. So I would love to hear more from other people on that. I think that when I think about my time, like we have some strategic partners that like we know that we need to have great experiences with, and I carve out time specifically just to work with them. And then there is this kind of there's other ones that we know that we like use cases that we know that we want to kind of go after and that are an important part of our platform. And I think that like part of what the challenge for us is figuring out like where do we need people there to like actually help get momentum and move things forward. And then like the other side is like how do we actually scale this so people can self-serve? And I think that that's kind of how I've been trying to think about it most recently is like how do we make sure that the people, even if like people are self-serving, that they can still have a great experience with the Trello ecosystem. And so I think that there are some companies probably here that are even more mature, a lot more mature than us in that, and just like actually like having more well-defined ways on how like marketing can happen and how like you can get included in like featuring or newsletters or stuff like that. And we want everybody to have access to that, not just like the people that we can like actually have the bandwidth to speak with. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think that I want to solve it with people, but I'm trying to figure out how to scale it in a way that enables us to allow some self-service and have similar results. So yeah, I'd love to chat more about that.
So if I can jump in,
yeah.
That's a broad scope of skills that you described. Do you have other people on the team that can pick it up? Can you make it role specific? Or is the same person doing that full scope?
Yeah, so we have multiple people on our team. However, where we allocate more people is, we have discretion over, and it's an interesting challenge as we look at it.
Yeah. Good.
Okay. There's a question here.
Okay.
Hi. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the app weeks that you do.
Yeah.
Some specific things like how frequently do you do it? Is it with one partner? Are there multiple partners together working?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for that. Yeah, there's App Week I think was originally like a once a year kind of thing, and it's grown. And I think that in this year we'll be trying to do them quarterly. And we've started to organize App Weeks around specific themes. So the most recent one we had in Key Largo, Florida, was around user experience design, and it was really actually more directed towards people that had existing apps within the Atlassian marketplace, and like how do we help people that have built apps over the years and have had maybe them for multiple years, how do we help them up-level their user experience? And we brought a bunch of people from our design team in to help. That's a real investment, right? And it's like that's showing signaling to those partners that like we want to invest in helping you make your apps better. And so we bring partners across all of the Atlassian products and from like all different types of partners. But we do. It is invite only. It's not available to everybody, and it is also very much. A intentionally limited group of people. So I think that we only have something like 100 spots for partners to join. And the idea of that is there's, I think, 30 or 40 people from Atlassian that come, and it's to keep this like a really intimate ratio there between the people from Atlassian and our partners. Because they like that. If we let that experience break down, like we want every other person that they're talking to is to pretty much be somebody from Atlassian to like remind them like, hey, we're here for you. We want to support you. So did I cover everything that you asked there? Yeah. So that's a little bit more about it. But I'm happy to chat more about App Weeks. The next one is in Portland in June. So if people are looking to go. Other questions? Any other ideas, things that I've missed, things that you've said, like when you've worked with a company, like, hey, that like went so much better, we should probably try doing that?
So
If Trello is free, how do you make money?
Well, Trello has a free version, but there is a paid version for teams of larger size. So there are, for power-ups, the platform side of things, we have a unlimited number of power-ups if you're on the paid plan, while you can use one free power-up per board on the free version. And there's all sorts of admin and control around the paid versions of the product. And if you think about some of your most important work is going inside of Trello, at a certain point, the organization really wants to pay for some of that feature, those features. Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, thank you so much for your time, attention. Come say hi and tell me more about your own platforms. Thank you.